Well, let me pray for us. Ask the Lord to give us some direction. Father, we thank you so much that we can join together like this. I pray that you will watch over our time and our technology, and just ask your blessing on all my brothers and sisters here, Lord, in the various places that you have them working. And just thank you, Father, that you've called us to be your children and that we can join together in you. It's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, and greetings to you, Noel. Yeah, your mic's off.
Put it on now.
All right.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Right.
Thank you.
And now Ryan was going to join us from his car. He's got another meeting in about 30 minutes. So Ryan, yeah, all right. We're seeing you and hearing you. Good. All right. Well, we got a lot of stuff to pack into this session, as always. We're going to talk about problem statements a little bit, and then Dr. Henry will be here shortly to talk about this issue called a theoretical framework, which isn't always as familiar to people. But we'll talk a little bit about that and how that relates to our work at BGU. I'm going to just say from the outset, just so you know, BGU has been a school that has really focused on practical work, practitioners. We've not focused on theoretical work as much. We want everything that we do to apply very specifically to the work to which God has called us in a particular locality, whether we're in a business situation or a church situation or a community situation, whatever it might be. Theology of work, which we endorse heartily, makes it very clear that each of us are called by God into specific kinds of settings. You're working there in an office, Ryan, are you in the San Francisco area, Ryan?
Yeah, yes, I am.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then Noel, you're over there in, let's see, where are you? You are in Guyana. Okay, yeah, you're in South America.
I'm in Guyana.
All right, right.
South America.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
And then, let's see, Maureen is from Jamaica, but she's right near in New Jersey. But anyway, God has called each of us to specific situations. So at BGU, we've always tried to focus our work on practical matters. Over the last couple of years, as we've brought a few more people onto our faculty who have pretty strong research backgrounds, they've been helping us a little bit increase some of the research skills associated with our dissertation process. We never want to lose the practical nature of our program, but we also want to make sure that we are good researchers in whatever God has called us to do. We've kind of adopted the term to be scholar practitioners, okay? We want to be good practitioners in places where God has called us, but at the same time, we also need to be scholars. So that's a tension that we will continually be experiencing, and I think we'll probably experience it here in the research course, probably more so than other places. Welcome, Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry got out of her meeting and has joined us.
Thank you.
I was just kind of talking about the idea that we work from a basis of theology of work at BGU, which means God has called people in various places, whether it's into the church or into a school situation or into an office situation, a business situation, or whatever it happens to be. We believe those are all valid callings by the Lord. And I was talking about the fact that I've been a school that have always been a group of practitioners, but recently we started trying to adopt the term to be scholar practitioners so that we are sharpening our research skills along with our practitioner skills. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Henry kind of comes from both worlds. She's done a lot of work in various kinds of ministries, but she also has a strong background in research skills. So it's really good to have her join us in this class. I'm learning things. I've been a pastor most of my life. Worked also, of course, doing professorial work in schools. But I mean, I'm learning always. And I'm trying to learn to sharpen some of my research skills. And so people like Dr. Henry and Dr. Martine both have some strong research backgrounds, so very thankful for having them on board and be stretching us a bit in some areas.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let me just make a few introductory comments about problem statements, and then Dr. Henry is going to share some a PowerPoint presentation on this concept, a theoretical framework, what that really means and how we can apply that to our dissertations. I'm going to share my screen just for a bit here. I really do want to have time left over at the end, though, so that we can share our various topics and try to dig into those a little bit. You seeing my screen, everybody?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
Okay. We're looking week 2 about starting to try to develop a problem statement, which is really the first section of that chapter 1 of our proposal. This is just the instruction sheet that I've given you, kind of indicating that we need to start that process with some kind of an introductory sentence or paragraph that just introduces the issue that you're working with. Then continue 1 or 2 paragraphs giving some brief background regarding the issue, and then make sure that you're documenting what you're saying. Kind of a second part, you may summarize a few past studies or what other people are saying about this particular issue that you're dealing with. The idea here is not to really list a whole many studies. You'll do more of that in the literature review, but just to give a sample of a few quotes from various studies, sources. And then finally, just summarizing why you think your project is significant in view of other studies and efforts that have been going on in relationship to this problem. And indicating how your approach may be unique from past approaches. For a DMin and a DTL, it's a little different than a PhD. A PhD is oftentimes working on expanding knowledge in the areas of academic work. It doesn't mean that a PhD isn't also going to apply that work to a particular situation, but a focus of a PhD is to add new knowledge to the community of knowledge. A PhD and a DTL degree program isn't necessarily going to be expanding theoretical knowledge as much as there's the sense of applying theoretical knowledge to specific situations and observing what happens there and then report on it. And so a little bit of a difference in focus. Like I said, in terms of what we're doing now with kind of our different people on our faculty, we're trying to kind of have the best of both worlds and trying to integrate those into the kind of approach that we've always used here at BGU in terms of practitioner. But anyway, one way your project could be unique would be applying specific transformational principles to your particular context in a way that has not been tried before. For example, Noel, you're working possibly with the issue of teen pregnancy. Hopefully you'll be able to apply some principles into the area where you're at that maybe have not been looked at in your particular context, even though maybe they've been looked at in other contexts. Maureen, as you're kind of working with the whole topic of entrepreneurial women in entrepreneurial endeavors. We've had other dissertations written on that topic, but maybe not necessarily being applied to the particular context where you are functioning. So that will be what you'll need to be doing. Ryan is kind of looking at some issues within the business sector in terms of how employers, employees, customers interact, trying to maybe bring a little more sense of care, and you use the word a symbiotic relationship, where there's kind of win-win would be kind of a popular way of saying that for everyone. And you've kind of looked at some principles from a theology of work that might be able to apply. So, A problem statement, you're going to devote, a few paragraphs to that, getting started. One of our tasks in this course is to be trying to take a topic and narrow it down to a level that it can actually be workable within the confines, a very narrow, limited time frame of a dissertation final project process. Teen pregnancy, a big topic. So we'd need to work at some questions that would help narrow that down to be workable within a particular situation. Employee, employer, customer relationships, a big topic that's been talked about in very many venues. But again, Ryan's going to be looking for ways to focus that topic, maybe even from a theology of work point of view, bringing in some biblical principles that we'll be able to apply and tested within a particular setting. So, all that is part of this problem statement work that we're asking you to be thinking about at this point in time. And so you can kind of be going through this instruction sheet, which you'll find under the files area under week 2. Let's say that for the purpose of a BGU final project proposal, the problem statement section describes a need to be addressed using transformational leadership principles. You've been at BGU, I'm sure now, for at least a couple of years, and you've become familiar with the 8 transformational leadership perspectives: servant leadership, reflective leadership, prophetic leadership, shalom leadership, and we've got 8 of those. So, and Claire Dr. Henry will talk about this in a moment, but actually those 8 transformational principles are actually a type of theoretical framework. It's a set of principles that have been put together into a system that we call transformational perspectives. Transformational leadership versus transactional leadership has been talked about in the literature for many years. But again, you are looking for ways to apply transformational principles to the situation that you're dealing with. So again, that in a sense is somewhat of a theoretical framework. The eight perspectives that we've talked about and studied in various classes. Just a few other things I will make sure you look as you're looking at this sheet. Don't confuse problems with symptoms. For example, unemployment isn't a problem, it's a symptom. Lack of education leading to unemployment isn't a problem either. However, lack of access to education may be a problem. So we may be always asking you, making sure you're not just dealing with symptoms, but you're trying to find some root issues that are being operating within the situation that you're looking at. To prove that your problem is really a problem worth the effort for your project. In addition to your own observations of the problem, cite other supporting evidence regarding the problem you plan to address. Facts could be geographical features of a region. Those are incontrovertible. Research, data like demographic information arises as a result of research statistics. Other kinds of research that have possibly are applying to the kind of methodology that you're going to apply to your particular situation. Do searches on Google Scholar and ProQuest. You started having a little practice of that this week. Expert opinions, respected practitioners may state an opinion about your topic. Citing one opinion does not always prove anything, but it does show you're on track with your reasoning and provides a counterpoint for you to address, okay? And then your own experience. All of us are experts in our particular areas. And so even your own experience, if you have expertise in an area, becomes valid content to bring into the research that you're doing here. The exact wording of your problem statement might change after you do more literature research and review. While your problem statement shows your reader why the issue is a problem worthy of the project, your literature review a later chapter of the proposal, will provide discussion on how others are defining the problem and what approaches are being used in other contexts. So again, what you're doing now in this week, in the next couple of weeks, you're stating what you want to work on. You put it in a topical form. What we're going to try to do then is get that narrowed down and get with some specific questions that you want answered that will help you focus your problem statement so that it will be very workable, say, within this dissertation process. You're also going to develop a section right there in the beginning of that chapter 1, which is the context of the problem. Every work that you're doing here in our degree problem is being done in a particular context that's important for your reader to understand. Some questions you could be asking, what's the location? What's the environment where you're going to conduct your study? Indicate any prominent features in the area. Are there geographical features? Are there issues in your community that are helpful to know in relationship to your particular topic? What are the people? Who are the people that are involved in the problem? Discuss issues such as their history, their worldview, their values, their beliefs, just the demography, the history of the situation. All those kinds of factors help a reader understand who are the people that are involved in your project. Who are the stakeholders? Those are anybody that's going to be affected by your project in some way. Both people who maybe are directly being affected in terms of being helped or beneficiaries of your project. Others who maybe are going to help you do your project, they are also stakeholders within the context of a project. Do ask that you use the proposal template to be doing all your work. That template has been worked out with the right margins and the right styles attached to the various subheadings, etc. All you need to do is highlight, say, a paragraph and begin to write your paragraph. If you need to change the subheading, you just highlight that subheading and start typing. And in that way, the style, the Microsoft style that has been attached to that heading or that paragraph will stay intact. And then hopefully, as you get through that template, you'll have a template that conforms to the writing, at least the mechanical writing standards for our BGU project. That's a very brief overview. If you have any quick questions, I'll go ahead and take those now, because like I said, I would like to give Dr. Henry time for her presentation, and then I'd like us to spend a little time, all of us together, at least talking about our topics and trying to apply some of these thoughts to specific topics. Okay, you will probably come up with other questions. I think what we'll do then, I'm going to stop sharing. So Dr. Henry, why don't you go ahead and start sharing, and we'll try to get through your PowerPoint. There's probably at least 30 slides there, and hopefully we can get through those in about 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll let you go ahead and share, Dr. Henry.
Okay, before I share, I want to get some involvement from the students here. I looked at the preliminary conversation that you have responded to in terms of your interests. And I think one of the recommendations that was made was to try and refocus your interest as a question. So I'm going to ask you, each one of you, to just give me one question. If you want to give me more than one question, 2 questions that you expect your research to address. And I'm doing this before I do the presentation on theory, because I want to use that presentation to illustrate the importance of asking questions. We usually say that research is about asking the right question. So any one of you can jump in. What is the question that you want answered?
I'm going to share my screen 1 second. Okay. Yeah, you may, because the question you're asking, Dr. Henry, is the question for this week, so they may have not gotten into the discussion yet for this week, since this is Monday. But this was the question. Identify 2 questions to which you want answers for your final project.
Right, yes.
And for each question, propose 1 or 2 underlying theories, response to 2 colleagues, etc. So what Dr. Henry is asking is kind of the discussion question you're working in this week. Trying to think of, at least start with one question. What is it you really want to, what is something you want to determine based on this project? And then you can start thinking about what kinds of theories connect to that, answering that question. So go ahead, give it some thought.
Yeah, I want to give it the first thought. And since I had written down something and I had asked a question, I want to change that aspect into a question now. And that question is, what are the enabling factors? What are the enabling factors that leads to teen pregnancy? What are the enabling factors that leads to teen pregnancy?
Okay. Good. Thank you, Noel.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I've made a note of it.
Yes.
Ryan or Maureen?
I'm still pondering that.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay. Maureen, you want to go ahead then and give Ryan some more time to think through?
I probably need more time myself, but I'm not sure if I asked or I didn't ask the question, but in writing my statement, I think I'm not sure. I thought I asked, actually wanting to go and look at my paper that I sent in. I asked the question, why it is Christian women becoming entrepreneurs.
You're breaking up, Maureen. Could you?
Yeah, I think the problem is that I should have been using a headphone. I apologize. I need to find one. I ran home and got here like 25 minutes past 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to search for a headphone. I should have one nearby. But the question that I wanted to answer, that I would like to answer is, why it is a Christian woman. I wanted to see if I could find more reasons than the ones that I know why Christian women tend to be entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So for my interest in this area is that I did work at one time as a training manager in what was called the Entrepreneurial Center at the University of Technology. And so, I have this big thing about entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Particularly with women.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ryan, are you ready now?
Kind of. I'm thinking. Well, something I've been thinking about is there a correlation between employee-client relation amongst the country's top companies that make them the top companies? Meaning, are they tops because they have better relations than the companies who are on the bottom?
Okay. Can you say it again for me? Because I missed something. I thought I heard, is there a correlation? And after that, I just missed the words.
Yeah, so is there correlation? I want to know if the companies who are succeeding, the top companies in the world, are they successful because they have better relations between their clients and their employees than the company who aren't successful?
So do top companies have better relations with their clients and employees?
Correct. Than unsuccessful companies.
Than
or struggling
unsuccessful companies. Okay, I've just made a note of that. Okay, Dr. Payne, can I share my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Share. And I'm going to do something a little different, Dr. Payne, than what I had started out with, but I'll explain it.
That'll be fine. Yep.
Okay.
And I know Ryan's going to possibly have to bow out here in a few minutes, but this session is being recorded, Ryan, just so you know.
Okay. Dr. Payne, you want to check and make sure, because I didn't see that red button being red, the record button. So you want to make sure that that button is red.
Sure.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
I am
mine does
going
say
to be
that.
using servant leadership. And I don't know how many of you have done the servant leadership class. Has anybody here done a servant leadership class? You could unmute your button to answer. Have you done it?
I am due to do it.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Okay. So what I've done,
I did it.
I've just finished teaching it this summer, is in that class, I did a session on introduction to theories in terms of looking specifically at servant leadership. But I started out, first of all, with the what is theory, because that is important, and use that as the point, the jump off point. I like to project the slide as a PowerPoint, but sometimes it gets, let's see. All right, we'll leave it at that. What is theory? Theory explains how some aspect of human behavior or performance is organized. So it enables us to make predictions about behavior. So at the root of research is a desire to get to the underlying theory of whatever it is you want to study. Because when we start to understand the theory, then we're able to make predictions about behavior and beliefs, etc. So a theory is a set of interrelated concepts, definitions, and propositions that explain or predict events or situations by specifying the relations among the variables. And that word variable is important. Now, to apply it to the questions that you have each presented, Noel says, and I like your question there, what are the enabling factors that lead to teen pregnancy? In that question, what are some key words or key phrases there that you have, Noel?
I have the key word, enabling.
Enabling factors.
Enabling factors.
Right.
And
so,
yes.
So what I want to suggest to you then is that you want to go to the literature and look at what the research on teen pregnancy says about enabling factors. In other words, you want to define that term, because when we are doing research, we are measuring. So that is important. Maureen, you said, why more Christian women, and I notice, and I'm going to comment on that, opt out of becoming entrepreneurs. So what is, or what are the key terms in your question?
I'm not sure. Opting out, I think, is critical for me. Where do they opt out?
I'm not hearing you well.
Now I put in my headphones. I thought it would have made it better. I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
A little better.
A little better. Okay. So I was saying that I'm not sure if the opting out is the key factor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would suggest, and usually when we formulate research or research questions, we suggest you start with the positive.
Okay.
And then let the research give you the answer if it's negative. So I would suggest that instead of, I'm sorry, this is what I did not want happening. Let me see how this goes. So I would suggest that instead of saying opt out, you tell me the other phrase you could probably put there. Something that would be a positive statement.
I'm not sure I understand. And to change the statement? Are you asking me to change the statement from opting out to?
I'm so sorry, I'm not hearing you well. Let me.
Yeah, she was asking if we want to change the word opting out, change the phrase, change the word.
Yes, opt out is a negative statement.
Yeah.
So instead of approaching it from a negative perspective, you want to ask questions that are open-ended. So the research will give you the answer. Because if you start with opting out, you're already suggesting that the answer is that they opt out.
Yeah. Okay.
But I want to suggest that they probably don't opt out. So,
Yeah, I think as it's stated right now, yeah, you're making an assumption, right? You're assuming, based on what you're assuming, is Christian women are opting out of becoming entrepreneurs. Okay, that's your assumption.
Yeah.
But actually, before you can just assume that, that would need to be tested in some way for your project. So how would you ask that question?
In a positive way.
In a way that you're not just assuming, but somehow in an inquiry way. It's trying
so
to.
it's open-ended.
Right.
So it's open-ended.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because the other issue I would do, and now we can get down to context, is that you're working within a specific area. You might even want to say, let's see, you're in Texas, right?
No,
you're in New Jersey right now.
I'm in New Jersey, but the question was not framed in the context of the States. It was framed in the context of home.
Okay.
Of Jamaica.
You're thinking very specifically in terms of Jamaica.
Well, in framing the context, in framing this, the question, yes. But I know that the context, there's a lot more happening outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
With, you know,
okay,
with a different spin on it.
What about if you frame it as, what are the factors that encourage Christian women to become entrepreneurs? Or what factors encourage? What I'm suggesting, that you start from with a positive, and when you start with a positive now, and then you allow the research to answer that question, it may be when you do the research you find no, they're not, and why. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, Ryan.
I think he had to go to another appointment.
Okay.
He's not with us.
The question he asked is, do top companies have better relations with their clients and employees than unsuccessful companies? And I think earlier I heard him use the word correlation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in fairness to him, he has the answer, but I want to suggest that, I will suggest, not I want to suggest, that he would have to define what he means by top companies.
Mm-hmm.
What are the characteristics of top companies? What do you mean by top companies? And that's important because one of the demands of good research is that you have to define terms clearly. There is no room for ambiguity and doubt in terms of the statements that you make, that the underlying statements that will guide you in doing your research. So he's going to have to define what he means by top companies, and he's going to have to define and explain what he means by unsuccessful companies.
Mm-hmm.
Those terms are important because he's also suggesting that top companies have better relations with their clients and their employees, and that is about relationship. And then to jump ahead to what I'm talking about about theory, one of the theories that Ryan's question will be addressing is the theory of organizational culture.
Mm-hmm.
That is the theory. That's one of the theories that can be used to apply to his research. Okay, so what is theory? We'll move on to the components of theory. Theories are concepts and their principles. A concept is a symbolic representation of an actual thing. The tree, the computer, the table. A construct is a word for concepts with no physical referent. So culture is a construct. A principle expresses the relationship between two or more concepts or constructs. So for example, a construct that is popular in research is the issue of engagement. And there are several variables that are subsumed under that construct of engagement. And when we do a study of engagement, we're looking at how these variables that result in engagement are interrelated. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Relationships between concepts, principles, and theory. Concepts and principles help us understand and explain what is going on. They help us to predict future events. They can be causal or correlational. Now, a theory is a related set of concepts and principles. It's about a phenomenon, the purpose of which is to explain or predict that phenomenon. So that's the relationship between concepts and principles and the theories. The importance of theory. It provides concepts to name what we observe. I'm going to put this PowerPoint in the course so you can go over and review it later. It allows us to explain what we see, and it enhances the growth of the professional area to identify a body of knowledge with theories, both within and without the area of study. It helps us to understand what we don't know. I mentioned to Maureen in the last week's discussion that currently I'm teaching a course on mentoring professional women. And this week, one of the video clips we're looking at is the role of mentoring for women who are entrepreneurs. So that is a concept that explains, that may be used to explain the issue of women becoming involved as entrepreneurs. Have they been mentored? who are their mentors, etc. Okay? The development of theories. There are 3 stages of developing theories: speculative, descriptive, and constructive. The speculative aspect of it is when we attempt to explain what is happening. The descriptive aspect is when we gather the data to describe what is happening. And constructive is when we revise old theories and develop new ones to explain phenomenon. The theory development process, theory, practice, theory. Let me open this, I'm sorry. This is giving me some trouble. I'm opening it up again. No.
Dr. Henry,
Yes.
if you go to the bottom of the screen, you could just press on the PowerPoint icon. Come to the bottom, right there. Yeah, press on that and see what happens.
Yes. It does this to me. So, okay, thank you. I want to go back. Thank you. Okay. The concept, the conceptual, sorry.
Gotta go up a little bit more. That wasn't the last slide. Yes.
Oh, okay. No, where am I? 14. No. I'm going forward. No, I came up way ahead. I'm sorry.
Hey.
I need to get back. Let me see. This is where I was. No.
Right
You
there.
are the theory development
Theory
process.
development, yes.
Right. So the theory, practice theory, takes existing theory, for example, in servant leadership, and applies it to organizational leadership to develop new theory. The practice research theory focus. The theory sees what is happening in organizational leadership, submits it to research, and develop a theory from the results. And then the third process is where the theory practice is built on an initial theory to develop a second theory and then applied and tested.
Want to go back to your PowerPoint? We'll tell you what slide you should get.
Say that again there.
Put it back to the PowerPoint. So you go down to the icon.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And then here now, I focused in on servant leadership theory. So basically, I just wanted to get you to start understanding the principle of theory and how it impacts research, as it were. Servant leadership theory has been, it started out really not as a theory, but more as a philosophy. And Greenleaf himself, who popularized the philosophy of servant leadership, said it was not meant to be it was meant to be neither a scholarly treatise nor a how-to-do manual. Basically, Greenleaf's work is a philosophy of leadership called servant leadership. The purpose of this study was to provide, and here I was summarizing a study on servant leadership theory. And the purpose is to provide insight into how researchers have attempted to operationalize servant leadership based upon evidence from published peer-reviewed journals upon other research. Now, and this is key, when we look at research from the perspective of theory, what we need to be able to do is to take the constructs and to define them and to describe them so that they are measurable. That's what we mean by operationalizing them. So servant leadership begins as a philosophy, which it is, but it is a theory. It can lend itself to measurement. And so when you do research on servant leadership, you are measuring for the presence of servant leadership. You're measuring to see is servant, is servant leadership evident? And if so, then you have to be able to identify what are the, measurable components of servant leadership. And that goes for any kind of research that you're doing. You're looking to measure. So what are the measurable components of the construct? I should have had my water with me. So research questions, and research questions are key. How was servant leadership defined? First principle in research, you have to identify and then define your key terms. Then in what context was servant leadership empirically investigated? How was servant leadership examined? Methodology, the methodology of the studies. That's important. And what were the results of the examination? And these basic research questions could be reframed to meet whatever study you would like to do or you're preparing to do. Going back to Noel's question, what are the enabling factors that lead to teen pregnancy? Noel, what are you going to have to do with that word factors? I think you have to
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have to look to see what are some of the things that contribute
Mm-hmm.
to teen pregnancy.
Can you identify some of them?
Well, one of the things has to do with single parent.
Okay. So
that's one.
family background.
Family background, yeah.
Okay.
So divorce also create a problem.
Okay.
The environment from which the girl is growing.
So environmental factors.
Yes.
And because if you use the term environment and environmental factors, then you can pull out a series of different measurable constructs that are related to environment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to use that as an illustration.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen, do you want to ask any question or make any observation, thinking about it used through your research lenses?
I can't ask any question, just now I'm actually trying to figure out where I'm at.
Okay, that's all right. That's the process is like that.
As a matter of fact, when I sent my thing in and I did say it was under construction and it could change.
Yes, you did say and it could change. I noticed that.
The truth is, it's something that I am thinking of or have always wanted to answer.
Mm-hmm.
But matter of fact, just trying to write those 10 sources to do the assignment and just, various things that I have been reading and so on. So many other questions were coming to mind.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
One of the things is that, when you ask that question about rephrasing, I smiled because I wondered myself last night, and I was desperately trying to get this done before the class to make sure at least I submitted the assignment. You know, so I've had a lot of thinking going on since doing the first week assignment and looking at different, you know, articles and stories and whatever.
Mhm.
You know?
Okay.
I'm listening to this thing about theory and so on, you know. I mean, a lot of stuff going on, you know, last week when we had to answer the theoretical um, response to if there was a difference between theoretical and conceptual framework.
Okay.
You know, so yeah, so I think I need a lot more absorbing before I can, you know, satisfactorily be answering or reading.
Okay. Let me just point out to you that the research process is it's not a straight line.
So
It's
I'm
not a straight line. And what happens, you always start out with an idea, a question, an interest that you are passionate about, that you want to study. But when you start to read the literature,
yes.
don't be surprised that in the process of looking at the literature, you find yourself reframing your question or moving to a totally different interest as a result of being exposed to what you find in the literature. So it's not a straight line. So don't
That's exactly what I'm thinking. That I feel almost like I could be changing because of what I have begun to
look
see.
at,
As a
right.
matter of fact, I was not even aware of how much information there was, you know, concerning Christian women in entrepreneurship because
Mm-hmm.
my question is what my limited exposure
Mm-hmm.
women in my personal context, and that's a small country. You know?
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah, so it's not a straight line. Don't be afraid that as you seek to refine it, you have to make changes. And that, so I'm glad you raised that issue, because what happens sometimes, the students, they start off with a passion, and as they expand their knowledge of the issue, some students feel like if they've done something wrong, if they made a change.
no, I
But you
know.
can,
I'm finding out that nothing wrong with changing. As a matter of fact, my interest in entrepreneurship went in well, developed something else because somebody had asked me to work with them in the area of microfinance.
okay.
And then I was left alone to develop this course. And I did all the work and I
Mm-hmm.
300 hours of preparation time and found so much information with this organization, CGAP, and through the World Bank and so on. I mean, and so I saw for myself all of the things that were happening in different areas in Africa, in the Latin Americas, in the Philippines, and so on,
Yes.
women and microfinance and so on. So I have this thing about women and business and funding and all of that. But I mean, I couldn't take that on as a dissertation for this project, you understand? So, which was why I wanted to stick to Jamaica. But last night, or the days before, just last night, but I was trying to finish it, when I was looking at the different things that were coming up, you know, when you search for a website or for blogs and so on and so forth, and I was seeing, you know, all sorts of things that I had not seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, wow, this area has a lot inside of it. It could occupy me for another 5 years, and I don't think I would have fully exhausted it.
Okay, so it is a big area. It's a wide open area.
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate your sharing that with us. Okay, let me just go back to this here. Okay, let me just move back to that. So as I said, I'm using servant leadership to illustrate to you the importance of theory and the role of theory in the development of research. The theory is what undergirds good research. So whenever you're doing research, invariably, you will be asked to identify the theoretical framework, the theoretical underpinning, because it's foundational to research. Okay. See, did we go this over? Let me see. So here is an example of how you break down a concept into measurable pieces. The attributes of servant leadership. They are identified as vision, honesty, integrity, trust, service, modeling, pioneering, appreciation of others, and empowerment. 9 functional attributes. So if you're going to do a research on servant leadership and measure for the presence of servant leadership, you're going to look to see how many of these 9 functional attributes are present. And then you have these accompanying attributes: communication, credibility, competence, stewardship, visibility, influence, persuasion, listening, encouragement, teaching, delegation. All of these are measurable attributes of servant leadership. Okay. Say that again, Maureen.
What do you mean by visibility?
Visibility, presence. Oops.
Go up, or down, yeah. No.
Okay. Where did I? Oh, all right. I am.
Well, while you're getting there, I might just make a couple comments on that issue.
Sure.
One of my students, it's probably been 3 years ago, actually did a study on servant leadership in a particular community here in the United States among pastors, and just trying to see, first of all, he wanted to know if pastors in a particular community had accurate knowledge of the term servant leadership. So he did a survey in terms of what that term means. And he did a qualitative survey on that issue and got their understanding. Then he took representative samples from each of the congregations of the pastors that were represented in his study, and he asked those congregational members about their pastors, and again gave them a survey asking them questions that related to some of these characteristics. How well do you feel your pastor listens when you bring forth an issue or a problem? And you might have a Likert scale or something. How available do you feel your pastor is when there's a situation? So that gets at the term visibility. Is he available? Is he present?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to take a few of these concepts, and then as you folks are working on your studies, for example, if you are trying to determine the servant leadership, I don't know what the word, level of servant leadership going on in a community, say a group of pastors, then you would need to design questions that would help you determine if these particular qualities are being reflected within that pastor based on that pastor's self-understanding, and then also based on the observation of others who have been working with
that pastor. And you would take both.
Settings. Right.
Good. Thank you, Bill. That's an excellent illustration. Right. So the issue of servant leadership is such a hot button topic and of such consequence, especially in the context of the church, because we know from the biblical teaching that servant leadership is the ideal that Christ has called us to, right? And so it is assumed that if you are Christian, you will be a servant leader, but that's not necessarily true, because there are attributes, there are qualities that you're expected to portray to illustrate that you are a servant leadership. So a servant leader. So it is not enough to say I am a servant leader, or to say that so and so is a servant leader. You have to get to the attributes, the qualitative representation of those attributes publicly. Okay. So I thank you, Bill. That was a good illustration. I'm sorry, the next time I have to not use this system because I do get a problem. Okay. Any other question, etc.? Because I've just used this to illustrate to us the kind of thinking and observation and attention that you need to make to get to the theoretical framework underlying your study. And of course, reading the literature will help you to get there. Noel, any observation or question?
I just like this set of questions that can be used to slant, to suit whatever we are doing. I think they are a good set of questions, and I may want to look at them for those that I will seek to write pertaining to teenage pregnancy. Yes, I just like them. They are just straightforward and maybe measurable. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
In one of our textbooks by Miriam, she'll have a few chapters on developing good questions.
Yes.
For surveys, qualitative interviews. She actually has another book, I think, specifically on, the whole book is on
questions.
On questions and interviews. And so, you can be looking at the book that we have as a textbook, say in this term, but there's other books that will even help you design questions to get at the information that you want to obtain.
Okay. So, like I said, I'm just using servant leadership to illustrate the importance of that theoretical focus component that undergirds your study. Okay. So Bill, I'll hand over to you and we'll continue.
Yeah, we'll be probably much out of time here, but I think this is interesting. You have on the screen there, servant leadership theory remains undefined, with no consensus on definition or theoretical framework. Because now even that particular statement is contextual. The community that this particular pastor worked with, he determined that there was a good understanding of servant leadership, and as he did his study, say among the pastor, certain key words, and as say we use grounded theory, he found certain words that kept arising. Listening was a word that came forth. Okay. Yes. Availability, that was a word that came forth. Empathy, that was a word that came forth. So he devised a whole set of adjectives that he felt this particular community of pastors entailed their definition of servant leadership. Right,
the attributes. So that he found that the attributes of servant leadership was present. Those attributes were present.
Right, in that particular community.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Anything else?
I wanted to comment on the whole thing to do with the servant leadership, because I asked the question, what do you mean by visibility? And,
yes.
I think it was Dr. Payne who said it more had to do with availability and so on, It stood out to me because when I did servant leadership as a course, I'm not so sure if it was something that came up. But one of the things that I found in looking through going through the servant leadership course and doing the work and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that before I did the course at Bakke, I used to hear the term, and different people use the term servant leadership. But I realize that a lot of them don't even understand or know
Mm-hmm.
what servant leadership really is.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like one particular person very close to me, he seemed to think that servant leadership, he was preaching one day and he made a comment, and he said, them people talking about servant leadership and so on, I'm not so sure what they mean by that. I don't think that all of that is necessary, something like that. And I recognized immediately that he even saw servant leadership as something kind of less than
Oh.
what was good for him.
Yes.
In other words, he was on an egotistical kind of,
Mhm.
Okay.
And I sat there and I shook my head, and I discussed it with my husband and said, he just doesn't get it because he has no clue how powerful servant leadership is. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I read that book, the one by Bakke,
Really?
the first book I read was by Bakke, the one about transforming that place that he worked,
Oh, Joy at Work.
Joy at Work. That book blew me away. That book blew me away. And I came to understand and appreciate so much just reading that. And then, after that, the subsequent stories of the different companies who practice servant leadership, and you see the results, the real life results, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
and things. So the thing that came to my head was, it would be great if more like some independent churches, because you understand now there's an ethic. You're part of a larger body and you break away from that larger body and you're on your own, you're independent. So there's a kind of mindset that comes with that kind of thing, you understand? And so
Yes.
servant leadership is a foreign concept to that kind of person who is trying to chart their own path and, develop their own thing and so on. So for them, servant leadership. And I have found it with several, this is not a scientific study, but it definitely is based on just being close enough to the situation and hearing them speak. And you recognize that because, you feel so big, you're no longer with that church organization, you're independent. You understand? So servant leadership to persons in that kind of mentality, that track, is like a bad word, But eventually it's because they don't understand
The
power
concept
and what it is that God really wants and how it makes you more powerful to become a servant leader.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you.
that's very true, Maureen. I mean, in terms of, it's interesting if you just try to do a study on servant leadership in terms of studies. And I mean, because it's a very popular term.
Very.
In our day.
Very.
And that term has different connotations for different people.
In different contexts, yes.
In different contexts,
Definitely.
exactly. And in the culture, even the worldview, when we're talking about worldview in terms of the context of our dissertations, worldview is very important in terms of the value system of a particular culture.
Yes.
So in some cultures, if you use the term servant leadership, that sounds like a negative. Right? It sounds like you're not being a leader. You're not taking charge. You're not being aggressive enough, because those are the positives. So again, the worldview is very important in terms of understanding a concept like servant leadership.
Sure.
Not taking charge, you're less than being there.
Yes.
In Jamaica, we have this concept about, things don't run me.
We run things.
We run things.
Right.
Things don't run me. So it's kind of that thought pattern.
Yes.
And so servant leadership. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Servant leadership? man.
We run
Yes.
things.
Yes. Yeah, we
Not
run things.
understanding that, yes, man, that is exactly who Jesus was. This
Yes.
is why he was so powerful.
Yes.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so the term, if you want to be great in the kingdom of God, learn to be a servant of all.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is, a person would say, once I understand servant leadership, why should I exercise it? And we would say it's a
Yes.
mandate for us as
For
Christians
Christians, it's a
from
mandate.
our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
Okay, we're just about out of time. Thanks so much, Dr. Henry, for the presentation. It really helps to really apply that concept, I think, to say servant leadership. That's very helpful.
Okay.
And we can do the same, I think, as we're looking at our projects.
I just stop
you know,
sharing.
Whether we look at, theology of work or joy at work. We use a joy at work model at BGU as a managerial style.
Yes.
That is a theoretical framework for us. It involves a certain set of principles and concepts that have been developed over the last several years called joy at work.
Yes.
And so as we look at that framework, say if someone had a project here of trying to, apply those kinds of principles to a particular organization and test, and determine how much of a joy at work environment is already present, and what would that look like if it were more present. And so the assignment, I will encourage you to be looking at the questions in the discussion this week, and which were to think, and like you said, Maureen, your topic is, you're working on a topic. You may even decide to change the topic, and that's fine. But you're using that topic right now. And there's a couple other, I know there's my voice is going out. There's a few other dissertations out there. One woman I know did a work in Lansing, Michigan on women in entrepreneurial endeavors there.
Okay.
And you might want to look that one up. I have another lady I'm working with right now. She's working on that concept in her particular community, and she's working on a whole program she called the GEMS program, which is actually training women in entrepreneurial principles, and they are becoming a funding organization to actually help women who would like to start businesses. And they do coaching, mentoring, funding. So yeah, so looking at what is being done in other communities, and then trying to take some of those concepts and seeing how would they apply within your context. And the other question you'll have to ask now that you're in New Jersey, will you have access to Jamaican women that could be involved in a study? That's something you will need to ask that question as you are thinking about this particular topic. But I would encourage you all to look at the questions and wrestle with that discussion question this week, which is to ask two things you really want to know from your study, and then try to apply at least a theory to each of those questions in some way. And a theory is like servant leadership, the joy at work, organizational culture. We were talking about Ryan in terms of a business as a culture. When I teach the organizational assessment course, we talk about the culture of an organization. There's an emotional culture. There's an intellectual culture. There's a infrastructure culture. There's a lot of different pieces. If you think of Jamaica, you're looking at a culture. And again, there's a certain climate. There's a certain culture of worldview, values, beliefs that will all affect, say, the topic of women entrepreneurship.
Sure.
All those, and then you'd study how some of those values, those worldviews, interplay with the whole concept of women working in entrepreneurial endeavors.
Yes.
Okay. So wrestle with those questions. We will be wrestling with you as well in the discussion boards.
Yes.
And like I said, and sometimes you can kind of feel like you're being put on the spot, and I understand that. But do know that we're together. I try to put forth the idea that we are wrestling with these issues together. Okay?
Yes.
We're all part of God's work, and we're trying to help each other do significant work in the parts of the world where God has planted us. So we want to wrestle with you to frame a particular problem issue in a way that you'll have some success. in addressing it within your context.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to wrestle together with these things. And so Dr. Henry and myself are both here to kind of help you wrestle and refine your words, your thoughts, your sentences, your paragraphs, so that we finally have something, a focus that you can work with some level of success, hopefully, within what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Anything else from your point, Dr. Henry?
Not really. Thank you.
Okay. I was just looking at the chat. Great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Let's all be looking at the discussion questions. I think the assignment this week is to take a try at putting together a problem statement based on what you're reading and what you're discussing. And again, it's not going to be the final problem statement, but so I learn best by doing it, and then having somebody critique my work a bit, and I keep refining it until it gets to that point that will work. Okay.
Yes.
All right. We will be back together again for a V-room, a Zoom room we call them now, next week, same time, Monday, 4:30 Eastern. And again, we'll just keep working through some of these thoughts and concepts verbally. And hopefully, it'll start to produce some good fruit as we're working these things together. All right?
Dr. Payne, is 4:30 a good time for Ryan?
That was the reason why we changed it, right? It was his lunchtime. He just happened to have a client that he had to work with. He said that just came up at his time, 2 o'clock his Pacific time. So hopefully that won't be a problem for him all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
He's going to miss out a lot. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, I'm going to need to end the session, and we'll be talking with you in the discussion boards.
Okay. Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. God
You're
bless.
welcome.
God bless you all. Bye now.
Yes.
Bye-bye.